Okay, in this short tutorial, I want to cover off some basic and a couple little more advanced concepts in Figma. And the intention is, so you have the tools that you need in order to be able to, and you know the mastery of it, in order to be able to create wireframes. So you know these wireframes, they don't need a lot of style. In fact, they shouldn't have it. It really is to test your design to see if it works, how you can improve it. And so I'm going to show you again some basics. I'm going to go over some basics in this tutorial on YouTube. We'll have chapter links so you can jump in wherever you want. Some basics, a little bit of typesetting tools, you know, where to find them. They're a little bit obscured. And, you know, this idea of auto layout and what it can do for you. So go here to File. So, you know, everything in Figma is built into frames. To these things called frames. And if something is an auto layout frame, something's an auto layout frame, you can see here the icon changes. So here is a frame that's not an auto layout frame, and here is a frame that is an auto layout frame. And I'm going to use both. But you know, everything in Figma is built into frames. This allows for interactivity. You can create frames using this frame tool, and you can create frames also using some keyboard shortcuts. And I'll show you a couple of different places where you can make frames and what you can do with them. First thing, you know, very important, is to make sure that you name your files. If your files aren't named, this makes it really difficult to keep it organized. And I have hundreds, thousands of Figma files. And it's really important to have a system when you name them. You can see here that this is inside the drafts folder. If I look here in my drafts, this is where this file is sitting. It's called Untitled and in the drafts. And when I go to work on it, I need to be able to find it. And be able to find it involves naming it and putting it in the right place. So naming it, you can name it just by double clicking on or just clicking on the name in the top. If you can't see that, it's because you have something selected. You need to deselect everything, and then this Untitled appears at the top. So I like to use this system. This is my system, and it's the same as the APA format. So something that you use in the university. So it's who, when, what, and where. So your name is who. And I like this format for when, which is the year. So just the last two digits for the year. So 2023, just 23.1. So it's the first semester and then the season. So this aligns with what we do at the university, which is winter semester 2023, but this is a nice little shorthand format that also includes this little identifier here, which sorts it nicely with my files. This is what I use for all my file naming. And this is a wireframing tutorial. And you know, in APA, you do title and then a description, so that can work too. Tutorial. And then where is GD304. And it's a nice little name, nice system. When you work somewhere, when you're working somewhere, they'll have a system. I tend to think mine is one of the better systems out there that I've seen in the places where I've worked, but you just need a system. So name, and then of course you don't want it sitting in the drafts folder. So I can just go here to my file, go to the drafts, and I can drag this into one of the projects that I've set up. And now it lives nicely inside here. So name your file, organize it, and then you want to make sure you always name your frames. This is probably the most critical one, because as you start prototyping prototyping your wireframes, you know, building clickable prototypes, you need to make sure that these are named in order to keep it organized, just so that you can find where things are. Otherwise, it's a nightmare. So, you know, you can start with your home page. And there you're nicely set up already. The other thing I want to look at is using grids, so layout grids. So I went over this briefly in class. Basically, you can turn on a grid pretty quickly. Use one of the default grids here. So, you know, with the frame selected, you go into the right-hand panel, and you should have a section in there called Layout Grid. You can turn them on. You have to have it visible. So if it's not visible, so up here under View, Layout Grids, you can see here that this is Shift G, turns them on and off. So, you know, with your layout grid, when you've added a layout grid, let's take this one away, add a layout grid, click on the icon, and you can choose columns, rows, choose columns to start with. You know, with a mobile column, with a mobile frame, you only need 4 columns. This is a materials design idea. One of the other ideas to keep in mind is that working in units in increments of 4 pixels. So, and some people say 8. So, you know, set your margins to 16 and your gutter to 16. And so that gives you your columns. And then, but then how do you get your rows too? So here is where you have to start working with grid styles. So here, I'm just going to add a grid style here. So here under, just click on the bento box and add a grid style. And I'm going to call this my mobile 4-column. Mobile 4-column. And create style. And now I can edit the style. So I can go here to this mobile grid style. And, you know, like with all the other styles in Figma, once you've created a style, you just hover over the style and then it gives you this icon that allows you to edit the style. And so at the bottom of the style, you'll see here there's properties and we have 4 columns. Well, I can add rows to it as well. So again, click on the bento box, change the grid to rows. And really what I'm most interested in when it comes to the horizontal lines is just the space at the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a margin at the top and the bottom of 24 pixels. And I'm just going to do 1 row for now. There may come a point where I want to actually change this, but this is a nice way to get both the rows and the columns so you have a starting place and an ending point. It's my home. I now have a layout grid to align things with. And this is really, really critical to make sure that, you know, from frame to frame to frame to frame to frame, you know, the placement of certain things is very consistent. You know, it speaks to Jacob's law and also to the integrity of your design piece. So here we have a frame, you know, and you creating your initial frame. I suggest you base your initial frame on the phone that you have. So here, if I click on frames, delete this. If I click on frames here, as soon as I click on frames, I get this option here of a whole bunch of different phone sizes. And so this is the viewport of your phone. So it's, you know, obviously it's the inside screen of your phone. If you're making a layout for the web, then it's a little bit smaller because you lose viewport to those controls, the web controls. But if you're making an app, you have the full use of the screen. If you don't see your phone here, there is more phones down here under archive that you can do. If you don't see it in here, so if your phone is that old like mine, then you have to go look up what the resolution of your phone is, and then you can enter a custom size. Just draw the phone and enter here 5 by 812. So here I have a home frame, and here I have another frame that I just created, and I'm going to give it the same layout grid. So I'm just going to go here to the styles and select my 4 column, and there I have 2 frames. Make sure I name this one. So maybe I'll call this menu. 2 frames. The next thing that's really important to think about is where we get our elements from. So this is all automatically saved to my team and my project. But where do I get these elements from that are consistent with the guidelines by the manufacturer? So the iOS guidelines, the materials guidelines, you can download them off the site. So if you go to the Apple guidelines, you can download the sketch file. And once you have the sketch file, you can just import it here. So you can click here and import it. I have various success with that. The one that I'm using right now keeps giving me errors importing. So that's one way. The other way is just to search for it. So a lot of people have done the work for you already and have imported these. And so I will post a link to this one that I use. It's got a couple of annoying errors in it, but they're pretty easy to fix. And this will give you most of the elements that you need. And, you know, the awesome thing about doing this is working from elements that have been described by the manufacturer, is that then when somebody comes in to your wireframe, they're not going to notice the style of things because it's so consistent with everything else that they've seen. And so what they'll notice, what they'll focus on is the functionality and the content of what they're working with. So I can just go in here and grab this system bar, copy, and I can paste it into my frame. Paste into my frame like that. I have a couple other things set up here that I want to avoid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this over here and put it here in my menu bar. And you can see right away that my margin does not line up with this. So again, just want to encourage you to set these things up as styles, especially your grid, because it's actually very easy to update it later when you've applied the same grid to all your frames. So here under row, I can just increase the margin so that it lines up with this here. I know this here is 44 pixels tall, so I can just make sure that this here is 44 pixels, and that'll allow me to always keep this in mind, that this here, this space is reserved for the system status bar. I can grab these items too and set them up, but I already have them. So I'm going to grab these. So one thing that can be really useful is when you download this, you're going to see here that it is set up as the hollow triangle. So that means that it is an instance of the master icon. If I want to go look at this, if I right click on it and I go to main component, you can see it goes back into this file that this person set up, and I've saved it to my folder, so it's mine. But I don't like always linking back to these libraries. The components that they make tend to be complex, which allows for a certain level of prototyping. At this point, I would prefer that you keep it simpler. So find the one that you need, copy it. If you're comfortable working with these component libraries, it's fine, but they tend to be fairly complex to get into when you first start. So what I suggest that you do is you copy and paste one into your file, you right click on it and you go detach instance. So now this is totally yours. You don't have to worry about what these other, so this person set up a lot of different variables around this. You can see here it's a very complex type of component where you can set what the type is. You can set the theme, can set the size. So all these things, start to add a complexity to what you're doing that you don't need at this point in time. So at this point, it's better just to detach the instance and then make it your own component. So you have this large button here. Go ahead and click on the make component. And what you're going to do is this. You can see now that this component has that triangle with the 4 little triangles inside. That means it's the master component. It's the main component. And so every other instance, every time I make a copy of this, copy, paste, you can see that anything else is going to be the one with the triangle in it. In order to keep things tidy, what Figma suggests that you do is you create a page that's just for components, and you store all your components in there. There are some limitations to doing that, which we'll go over later in the class. Like for now, it's fine just to leave it on the same page and just move it out of the frame and store your components in one part of your page. So you set your pages here, and here we have page 1, which is this tutorial will only use one page, so we only need to leave it like that. But you can add more pages to it to organize your files. Some of you have already been doing that. So now we're working with an instance of the main component. Again, if I right click on this now and I go to main component, it'll go to this component up here. Any changes that I make to this will be applied to every instance. But the awesome thing about it is that I can change the content of this. So I can call this start. And you can see that it doesn't change the content of the main component. So every instance of this button can have different content, but the styling of the function of the main component is going to be applied to every instance. So one of the things about this component is that it is set to with the constraints in it so that it'll resize so the start is always in the center. And I'm aligning things with my grid. One of the challenges with working with this stuff, with these, fluid layouts, these layouts that need to be fluid, is that you need to be able to enlarge things and things need to flow automatically. And this is where auto layout is amazing. I'm just going to show you here. So again, this is a component that I copied from the same library. I'm going to make this into master component. I detach the instance, and I'm going to call this input field. If I go and I make these instructions longer, I would want this space to stay the same. So I'm going to go over here to good old chat, OpenAI. And what I did is I asked, so this is one really good use of AI, is to ask it for placeholder copy. And so when you are, we're used to in print using lorem ipsum, which is based on a lawyer's rant from, it's based on Latin, not Greek. So a rant by a lawyer back in, the Enlightenment, era of Enlightenment, and it's been scrambled. We can put in real copy. So something that really works, really says something and is, part of the function of the page. And so if I want to introduce my user to this website and introduce the user to the page, I would put some copy in it. I may not want to write this much copy, but I can instruct Chat GPT to write me some copy that's placeholder copy, and then I can edit it. This is a really good use of AI, is to use it for placeholder copy. So if I go in here and I paste that copy, you can see it's not doing what I wanted it to do, which is force this down by the same amount of space all the time so that my elements stay in the same proximity to each other. it gets even more complex the more elements that I have on the page. So you can see, Figma helps us with these spaces. So here, if I hold my Option key down, when I have a frame selected and I go outside of it, it'll give me the spaces in between. So super useful that way, but it doesn't, I can go here and I can actually nudge this and give me the precise distance, which is super useful, but I want to make it flow every time that I change this copy here. So obviously this is too long, but it's a good example. So how do we do that? We do that with auto layout. So what I can do is I can select this, select my email field, and select start, and I can group them all into one auto layout field. And the way that I do that is I go up here to object and I go add auto layout. So there's a few different ways you can do it, and it's really useful to know a few of them. This is a really good one because you can select a bunch of can select a bunch of objects and just create an auto layout frame in one step. So you don't have to go and create a frame and then turn the frame into auto layout. You can just go and create an auto layout frame right around this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And here you can see now we have this frame here, and I'm just going to call this, give it a name. So I'm going to call this, I'm just going to rename this home page. And I'm going to name this frame input fields. I'm going to actually change this to login. Okay, so in order to keep this consistent style, with the rounded corner that's a certain size, and I'm just going to turn this off here so we can see what's going on. Okay. So this element here that I've copied and pasted is a little bit wider. And so I just want to keep it so it's, the same as the width of my grid. So what I want to do is I actually want to make this, get rid of this outside frame, and again, simplify the component so it's easier to work with. I can add more complexity as I start like developing my, my skills with this tool and my ability to work with these components. So if I look at this here, you can see it's a fairly complex, again, another fairly complex field that allows me to do a lot of different things to it. And what I want to do is really all I need is this here, this frame. This frame has the styling of the, the box. And inside of here is the title. Those are the only two things that I need. This here is still a component. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go detach instance. I'm going to go here and I could go, I'm going to leave that, I don't need it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and take this. I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to delete this whole thing. Delete, and I'm going to paste it inside. So now I have this thing called a table view row with a frame inside of it, and I'm just going to rename this input field. Text input field. Again, as you start developing your ability to recognize what these different components are and how to use them, be really consistent with what you name things, and that will really help you as you move forward to make it easier to stay organized and develop these kind of rich prototypes. I take this and I'm going to make it a component. So select both of these, make it a component, and it is going to be called input field. And drag the master one up here, make a copy, and now I have a instance of it. Let's drag this down here and it will pop it right into the auto layout frame that I'm working with. So input fields. So I'm going to turn my grids back on, layout grid, and that'll allow me to align this to the grid. So you can see here that now I can go in Let's take a quick look at the auto layout. So here under, if I select the auto layout field that I made right here in the left-hand bar, left-hand panel, you can see here that it's set to, this is the width and the height. So it's set to hug the components. If I do a fixed width, that means that the size will not be dependent on what's inside. If I change this to hug components, it'll always stay the same size as that. I can also set this to fixed width or hug components. It is different. It reacts to the sizes of things, obviously. But here under auto layout, I get to decide the direction. So if I click on that, it'll flow everything to horizontal. I'm just going to unclip the components here so you can see them. So you can see it's flowing that way. I'm going to go back to my auto layout, and that is vertical. So it's going to flow everything vertically. This here is the space in between the elements. So again, you want to be working with units of 8. That's specified in material guidelines. I haven't seen it in the new human interface interface guidelines, but it is a pretty standard thing to do, is to work with units of 8 sizes. Another thing is, you click in here, you'll see that this is set to San Francisco Pro, which is the default typeface for Apple products, and it's 22 points. I would not set my text any smaller than this. In fact, I'd usually set it a little bit larger. I can go 22. And you can see here, this is set to 5. So now, if I make this smaller, so let's say I take out this sentence, everything will automatically flow. I can actually add another component, so I can go copy and paste, and I have another instance of this input field, and I could make this password. So again, with the content of instances can change, and it won't affect the master component. So I can go here to my master component, and let's say that I'm not crazy about this weight. I want to make it a little bit heavier or a little bit lighter. Well, I can do that. I can go in here and I can say, okay, let's make this light. Or even, if I want to look at a more advanced idea, I can go here to my fonts. So right now it's set to light, and I can actually use variable fonts. And variable fonts are really, really important when it comes to the web, because what variable fonts allow you to do is store all the weights in one file, which makes your website perform a lot faster. Before, what we had to do is we had to include a font for a file for every font. So a file for every weight, a file for every weight italic. So you have bold italic, regular italic, light italic. Each of those was a font. And every time that your browser has to make a call to the server to ask for a new file, it adds time to load your web page. And so storing all of those fonts in one file made a massive difference to the performance of websites. So variable fonts, amazing. So you can actually set the weight in one file. Some variable font files allow for quite a few different axes on them. San Francisco has both optical size and weight. So optical size is when you're moving from dark mode to light mode. And so pretty amazing. So that's variable fonts. Bring variable fonts back into the course later in the course, just because it's so amazing. But it is a little bit more advanced concept, even for typography. So you can, as soon as you've specified a variable font weight, it'll be added here to the bottom, and then you can just set it every time. You can also enter a number in there as well. You're probably a little more familiar with seeing these numbered weights. So that's another way to specify your sizes. And you can see here that when I do that, it automatically updates in here. Again, you want to make sure that you're working with styles. So here I'm going to call this body copy. Or if you want to be web specific, you can just call it P for paragraph. And so now that I have a P size, the way that I update this is I just, here it tells me, if I select it, it'll tell me which style this is. So here I'm looking at, here under styles, I'm looking at P. If I click on it, it'll give me a pop down for all the styles. And here is the edit styles button. So this allows me to control a lot of different elements of this, this style. So it tells me to choose the typeface. And this is San Francisco Compact. I may want to go with San Francisco Pro. And this allows me to choose a variable size, variable font size. I may want the same one. I may want to go up in size a little bit for my body copy. One way to work out your sizes is using a scale, which is quite beautiful. So if you start with your body copy, and let's say going with a more standard weight, so let's go with 300, and say this is my body copy size. I'm going to give myself a title for this page. So copy and paste. And you can see what Figma does automatically is it gives me the same space between all my elements. So I'm going to call this, welcome to our website. Call it an app. For this new one, this is going to be my heading size on my H1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break the link to the style. I'm going to just take this size here and I'm going to go times 1.618. And you'll recognize that is the golden section, the golden ratio, and that'll give me another size that's just big enough that it works. And if I want to, I can round this off just for convenience to 29 points. And I'm going to call this H1. And you can see right away that there's an order to this. Everything starts to fit together. Because of this auto layout, everything is quickly falling into place and sitting in this kind of like clear order to how things fit together. Turn this off. You can see there's still order to it. And then at the bottom, let me want to add, okay, the user doesn't have a login. Paste. And I'm going to say here, don't have an account, sign up. This, of course, can be quite a bit smaller. So I'm going to give this a new size. I'm going to scale it down. So I'm going to go times 0.618. And that gives me this other size that I can work with. I'm going to just round this off to 11.5. And I'm going to create a new style, and I'm going to just call it caption. Figma does colors separately, so colors aren't part of your type style. I have a color color chosen here, and now I have my first page. So some really basic ideas with how to work with auto layout and type. And there's a lot of different attributes you can set for type. So under here, under caption. So under the ellipses, you'll see here I have options for how to style this, and it's very limited. It's missing items. This may happen to you. You may go in here and say, okay, I want to restyle this, but it's not giving me the options that I can see here, right? I don't want to style the whole, give the whole thing. Let's say I want to give it an underline. So this is like a little more emphasis on the fact that is a hyperlink. So if I go here, I can actually add an underline. You know, again, a little bit buried, but a lot of control over it. So under here, I can actually give it, but it's going to underline everything. I don't want to underline everything. You know, this is to give it a style, to give it a decoration, and that is to remove it. I don't want to change the whole style. I only want to change this part of it. So this is not a paragraph style. It's not like InDesign and Illustrator where I've set a paragraph style. This is actually a text style. And so if I want to change just this part of the text, I can highlight it and I can actually go here and I can actually break the link to the style, and that is only for this part of the text. It's actually more like a character style than it is a paragraph style, even though it has paragraph styling ideas built into it. So I can go here to sign up, go to the ellipses, and here under details, no, under basics, here's my underline. It's kind of the basics. There's quite a bit more ideas in, you know, in when it comes to auto layout and setting up your frames, but I think this is a nice core set of ideas to focus on, is making sure that you're working with text styles, that you're working with you know, elements that follow the human interface guidelines or the material guidelines, either one or the other. You can find those here if you search under community. So under community here, you can search for these things. There's quite a few different libraries available. You can also download them off the materials guidelines website or the human interface guidelines website and upload them to your import here. You can import them in. It's not working for me right now. There's one more thing I want to share with you, and that is a lot of you are working with Figma in the browser, but you can see here that I'm working with Figma as an app. It has the same functionality, so they follow their own important rules for when it comes to user experience design. So, you know, all of these links here, all of these links are available with both on the browser and in the app are available here. So it's a duplicated set of menu items. You know, obviously one advantage to working with an app is that this is 2 clicks away. So I have to click to open it and click to get access to them here. Whereas here they're accessible on 1 click. But the biggest advantage for me has been the ability to work offline. So working on a plane, you know, working in places where the Wi-Fi is not, you know, always available. This is a great way to work on your files offline, and, you know, have a little bit more flexibility with how things work, the amount of room that I have on the real estate I have to work with. So again, pretty short tutorial. I'm gonna look at some more concepts more in depth as we move through the course. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.